This is Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files by Richard Sauder, PhD. And Richard Sauder, I've covered a couple of his books before. I might have actually covered 2 or 3 of his books in previous reviews. This is an updated version of a previous book. This one has, the foreword is dated 2021. So, relatively new book, but most of the contents of this are from about 10 years ago. So if you have the original Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files, this is essentially the same book. The foreword is different. I haven't reread the entire book to see if there's any other contents that are different. But the foreword alone, it's good to hear an update from Mr. Sauder, Dr. Sauder, who now is in Ecuador. And I did find his website. In fact, that's why I found this book. His website is, I think, Event Horizon. If you search Event Horizon, Richard Sauder, you'll probably find it. But he has a lot of fascinating insights about underground bases and what might or might not be happening there. The interesting thing in his foreword, he mentions Peter's Mountain. And I thought that was worth talking about in light of his book, because Peter's Mountain in Virginia, not West Virginia, but Virginia, is an interesting site that if you are into this sort of thing and looking into top secret bases and that sort of thing, the interesting thing is the Peter's Mountain site is a site that appears to be like the other AT&T long lines or Autobahn facilities. And these were underground facilities maintaining a communications network in the event of a nuclear war. But the Peters Mountain site that looks exactly like those other sites appears to serve some other purpose. And he mentions that briefly in his new foreword. I think it's in his foreword, but it's in here. But the important thing with that is on Google Earth, I've marked several of these places. When I read these books, I'll go on Google Earth and mark these. And the Peters Mountain site is one where my pen consistently disappears. When I mark that site, Google Earth will take it back out. And a few of the other AT&T sites, I found that Google will literally remove your pen when you mark those sites. So you can play with that yourself if you, now I don't know how long it takes them to do that, but you can play with that yourself by go on Google Earth and search Peters Mountain Road, Virginia, and that'll take you to the Peters Mountain site. It's on the top there. Otherwise, if you just do a search for Peters Mountain, it's going to take you to West Virginia to a totally unrelated site. But you'll know when you found it, it's a very distinctive looking, very obviously underground base kind of place. But anyway, back to Dr. Sauder's work. He covers a lot of new ground in this. This is a continuation of his other research into underground facilities. And one of the things that he really gets into in his writing is the constitutional repercussions of having these backup continuity of government facilities and the implications for our democracy in that. And for instance, he talks about in Mount Weather, which maintains a parallel government, that in that parallel government you have all of the positions of U.S. government in that parallel government in Mount Weather. And his point is a valid one, which is how can you have these parallel posts in government that are unelected? So essentially you're saying in a national emergency, you default to this government in waiting, which is not elected. So essentially you have a very polite looking dictatorship. So that I think is a really important point to think about in regards to the continuity of government program, is you have an unelected parallel government in waiting, and who's to say that when the president issues a national disaster or a state of emergency warning that isn't the actual power base operating the U.S. government? Something to think about. So anyway, lots of good stuff in this. He has an interesting section in here he calls, letters from the underground or something, all people like you and I who've written him and told him crazy stories that they've run into. Those are fascinating to read. Lots of good stuff in here. So definitely worth investment. This is a relatively inexpensive book. Good for your library if you're into this sort of thing. Lots of good documents in this. Thankfully, printing has improved since his first book. So now he's a lot more liberal with his pictures. But anyway, Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files by Dr. Richard Sauder. And I'll close with this, and just to those of you watching this that might be into underground bases, secret locations like that, this subject has fascinated me for some time, and I might have said this in a previous video. If not, if I have, please excuse my ramblings for a second. But in 1992, I think it was around Christmas time of '92. I had the occasion to visit a missile silo, a decommissioned missile silo out in West Texas, out in Winters, Texas. And at the time, I had heard a lot of stories from my friends out in West Texas that there were these Cold War infrastructure kind of things like abandoned missile silos out there. And I was like, that's got to be some kind of urban legend. Surely not. Well, I kept asking people and bugging people, and eventually a girl I was dating at the time, she knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, and they were able to get me to one of these silos. And I took my camera, and I'll have to make a totally separate video and see if I can scan in those pictures, because I was able to go in there with my camera and take some good pictures of a Minuteman missile silo. And I will say, and I say Minuteman, this is the old I can't remember which Atlas or Titan silo this was. This is the type of silo that was operated from I want to say the like 61 to 65 or so. But I was blown away going into this silo. This guy had built his house over this silo in Winters, Texas, and going into the silo, it was mind-bending to see this, because this was a rusted old facility that looked futuristic. It was like something out of a sci-fi movie to see these giant blast doors, these interlocking teeth when they would close, and everything on springs. And at the time I was 19 years old. I'm thinking, this is insane. The idea that this is throwaway technology, that this is on the open real estate market, to the point that homeboy upstairs just built his house on top of this missile silo. What is the actual state-of-the-art technology? If this is literal throwaway technology, what has surpassed this? So where are we at now? And that really nagged at my brain for years of thinking, okay, where are we at now with this technology? If something this complicated, this futuristic, can just be sold in the open real estate market and literally abandoned to a dude with his chickens on top of it. So that really got me thinking that there is much more going underground than people are willing to acknowledge. And since then, I've run into a lot of people over the years who have stories of working in facilities like this. And as soon as you strip away the alien aspect of it, if you just address this as an issue of, hey, what's the state of the art in continuity of government or underground bases or whatever, it's amazing some of the stuff that will come out. I had a customer, again, back in the early 2000s, came to one of our workshops on molding and casting concrete. And this guy at lunch, we sat together and we're talking about some of this stuff. And I didn't even bring up some of this, but I was asking him, what are some of the crazier projects you've worked on? And without prompting, he dove into this whole thing about building underground hangars for aircraft out in the area around Abilene. And talked about some extensive hangars that they built underground, and talked about anti-aircraft emplacements they had built, and a lot of crazy stuff that I would have thought was science fiction had I not read some of this. And I've also since had a customer sadly passed away that worked for the Army around the Vietnam era, who told me about some pretty sophisticated facilities under Fort Hood and under Carswell Air Force Base and under FEMA and Denton. So if any of you have information about that, I'd love to hear about it, because I could go on at length about that, but there's some crazy stuff underground, Denton, Texas, connecting Carswell Air Force Base, and possibly even as far down as Waco or Fort Hood. But so really interesting information about some of this stuff. And I'll see if I, in the future, I'll do some more. If you're interested, I'll do some more stuff on this. But Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files by Dr. Richard Sauder. Really fascinating information. And if you have any stories about any secret bases or something like that that you've encountered, I'd be very interested in hearing about it. And I'm not talking about third, fourth hand rumors. I'm talking about if you've encountered or you met someone that's told you about something like that. I'd be really curious. So there you go. Hidden in Plain Sight.